The first one was too dark, so insert lighter colored turtles, more immature humor, and Brad Garrett playing Krang. The turtles come out of the shadows this week.
It's the Halloween parade, bro. It's like the one night of the year where we fit in. Cool.
Get back here. What part of moving the shadows don't you understand?
I've never seen anything like this before.
Guys, I got a lead on what's going on.
Sensei Shredder.
This will help us build an army.
This is gonna be good!
You're a rhinoceros!
And you're a...
Huh. I'm a little piggy.
This is the Superhero Pantheon. On this podcast, we take one superhero film a week and decide whether it should be in the Pantheon, the Pile of Shame, or somewhere in between. My name is Jerome Cuson. You can find me on Twitter at JeromeC1985. You can find additional episodes of this podcast through Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, and all of your favorite podcast apps through The Real World. We strongly encourage you to leave a 4 or 5-star review so as to help people discover this show and the great work that the folks at The Real World are doing. If you would like to interact with us or send feedback, you can do so in 2 ways. First, send an email to superheropantheon@gmail.com. Second, find us on Twitter at Hero Pantheon. My co-host for this week and every week will be Brian DeBrain. He can be found on Twitter at Brian DeBrain. And Brian, if you can believe it, we are ending our run of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movies this week, and we are ending things on a high note, right?
Yes, a high note, but I think, wouldn't you believe it, that I might actually have a higher score of this one than last week's Ninja Turtles review, so I don't know what that means, but it's not even that big of a difference anyway. But thank God Johnny Knoxville, as I mentioned last week, is not in this movie, and that really already automatically increases the hero score from what I had last week, so that's a little fortuitous spoilers to come.
All right, there really is not much to say as far as kind of some of the notes go. Of course, we have Stephen Amell joining the cast as Casey Jones, and when he is smashing up the bar, Ice Ice Baby by Vanilla Ice is heard on the jukebox. And of course, this is a shout out to the ninja rap that Vanilla Ice performed in Secret of the Ooze. There is a deleted scene that had Judith Hoag, who played April O'Neil in the 1990 Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles movie. She makes a cameo appearance for this deleted scene. And Brad Garrett, who voices Krang in this movie, is apparently best friends with Pat Fraley, who voiced Krang in the 1987 version. Fraley personally endorsed Garrett as Krang when he was announced. And I have to be honest, that is not a good choice. Like, Brad Garrett's voice coming out of Krang's mouth, it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I don't know why they just didn't get the original guy, because, it just sounded like an imitation. But I don't know if kids would know the difference, man, because I don't know if, like, the kids watching this in 2016 are watching the original 91. And I know that the voice of Krang is completely different as well in the 2012 show, so...
I'm going to get to that in just a moment, but I'll let you finish.
Okay, it just seems too Brad Garrett-y, and I know, man, that... I don't know if it's just he's so typecast as the older brother of Raymond, and everyone loves Raymond, but it was just clearly Brad Garrett, and it just felt so off. But I don't know. Krang is a weird voice anyway, and I know he was going for that kind of weird, squishy kind of kind of sounding voice, but at least he tried. Like, if I was to rate it out of 10, I would give it a 7, but it's not nearly as good as the original Krang, because the original Krang just had this weird vibe to it that kind of fit the character. And maybe it's just kind of like an animated thing that you can only pull off in animation.
I mean, I think there was a good voice for it. And I think that the way the 2012 show approached it was so much better, because I think the fact that Brad Garrett's voice is very deep, I think that certainly can work for characters like Eeyore, for example. I mean, he's literally the perfect choice to play Eeyore. But Krang, I think you're looking for, like, kind of a grating, annoying voice. And the 2012 show did a really great job of it. The first person they cast to play Krang was Roseanne, and regardless of what you think of Roseanne personally, that is an amazing choice and an amazingly like well thought out, like very subtle. Like kids are not going to be able to identify Roseanne, but adults who are watching that are going to go crazy when it's Roseanne's voice coming out of Krang's mouth. That was really good casting. And then the second person they chose was Gilbert Gottfried. Also an amazing choice. They both have, let's face it, annoying voices, but I think it works for that character, and it was so much better than Brad Garrett.
See, that's the kind of vibe that I want, is like weird comedy, but like kind of creepy, you know what I mean? And just like we all love Gilbert Gottfried from the 90s and him being the bird from Aladdin, but like he's got this weird kind of creepy voice. I mean, it's not him being creepy, but he's got a creepy kind of sounding voice. And that kind of adds to that character. And Krang to me is always still kind of creepy and slimy, but not necessarily a joke that he kind of became later on in the show. But earlier on in the original run of the cartoon, like he kind of felt more of like a serious kind of villain, right? But, you know, over time, 5 seasons later, obviously he's kind of a joke. But I think you can kind of treat him seriously, like the way they, at least in this movie, they try to treat him a little seriously. So I appreciate that.
Right, and he kind of betrays the Shredder, like, for no reason. I mean, I guess that, I don't know what they were going for. Like, that's the problem with doing this as a movie instead of a TV show, is that they try to build this relationship up. They have like one scene together, they form an alliance, and then the next time we see them together, Krang turns on Shredder, and that's just not well executed. We'll talk more about that when we get to the villains. This sequel was announced 2 days after the 2014 movie was released. The Turtles are designed in this film to look more like their 1987 counterparts, even though they're still CGI and steroid monsters. And I don't know really what else to say. I mean, I think the designs are still pretty poor, and I think the differences as far as the design are pretty negligible. And I think when we talk about the hero aspect of things, there is this tease, there is this possibility that the Turtles can be made human, and Leonardo makes this inexplicable decision to not tell two of his brothers, and it basically leads to like them splitting up and them arguing, and the way the drama plays out, it feels so unnatural, and it doesn't feel right the whole time I'm watching this. And I don't know if there was a way to do this that was maybe a more mature screenwriter and director could have executed this in a way that made sense, but a lot of the drama that was involved with the four turtles just felt very false to me.
Yeah, I think that's because they're not in suits. Like, the reason the drama works in the original is because the actors are giving it their all and there's actual actors in the suits kind of thing. Here, it's like, no, that's just guys in the CGI and they probably just had actors stand in kind of thing. But it's just missing that emotional connectivity, and that's one of the criticisms that The Lion King got this past summer, and I totally see that here. Like, especially here when they're going for that drama. Like, it could work if they were in puppets and you had really, like, good voices. The only one who I really think that they got the closest to working was Leonardo, because the voice acting change was great, because it actually made him seem like a real, like, I don't know. He was the closest to the Turtles that I felt like they got to. Like, Michelangelo was still way too annoying. Raphael was too much of an asshole still. Like, the wrong kind of asshole. Not even the Wolverine type.
I will say, I did like Donatello. I did like his voice acting in both the first movie and the second movie.
That was good, because he's supposed to be a nerd. So that fit. But I definitely like the improvement in Leonardo change here. But man, I just kind of felt like they were going for that, and especially just the whole not telling. I thought that was a good little concept. The idea is that they got this mutagen that can kind of turn them back human temporarily, or God knows how long, and Leonardo as the lead.
But there's no reason not to tell everyone. Like, you're just setting yourself up for failure, because they're going to find out.
Right, and that's the thing. Like, that's the way that I saw that playing out as well, and I thought it wasn't going to play out too well, and it doesn't really make sense, like you said. So it just kind of messed up that the way they put it together, because it could have been so good, you know what I mean? But they couldn't piece it together right, and the fact that the CGI doesn't give you the emotional connectivity, so that really lacks in that area. But I don't know, it just, and the way that Splinter kind of gets left in the background in this movie, he does nothing in this movie. So again, just complete waste of time, and the CGI on him didn't look good either. So, and then Casey Jones was like, I don't know. How do you feel about Stephen Amell? Because I know you're kind of mixed bag on him.
I'll get to Stephen Amell in just a minute. I want to talk about Megan Fox as April O'Neil. I think she is treated marginally better in this movie, even though I guess she's kind of supposed to be like a super spy at the beginning of it, and by the end she's got her journalism job back. This is very strange to me, but again, there's more male gazy stuff when she wears the schoolgirl outfit. I couldn't believe this was happening in what's supposed to be a kids movie. I like Stephen Amell. I do have strong feelings against like seasons 3 through 8 of Arrow. I don't think it's very good, but I think Stephen Amell as Arrow has been a great choice, and I think here he is just woefully miscast. And I think there are certain characters that he could probably play. Like if when they reboot the X-Men, he's probably someone that I hope that they get to play Cyclops, because I think he would actually handle that role really well. I just think, when I think of Casey Jones, I think of someone that is kind of on the grittier side, and that's what Elias Koteas did so well. But Chris Evans is not gritty. Stephen Amell is not gritty. I don't know. There's also something, Stephen Amell also came off as very young in this role, like too young even for Megan Fox, and so the chemistry didn't quite work there. And the way that he was shooting the hockey puck, it was very obvious they were using like CGI pucks, and that also did not work for me. And Will Arnett, again, is just in his own movie.
Yeah, for me, I think the problem is that the fact that they made Casey Jones like too clean cut, and they just did get the character right from the get go. You can do like Stephen Amell as Casey Jones, but the problem is like, why do you got to make him a clean cut cop? Like he's not. I don't even think he's supposed to be a cop. He should just be a dude who used to be a hockey player, who's sick of the foot and all this crime, and the cop's not doing anything, so he has to go out there and be a vigilante, and then he finds the turtles and teams up with them. Like that story makes much more sense than this idea of him as a cop and just doing this. He was doing the bit of the Dark Knight, of that comedy bit where the cop wouldn't shut up during the Dark Knight Joker breakout, right? Or the yeah, they were trying to break out Harvey Dent in that scene. It was the same scene, and they did it here, and just Stephen Amell would not shut up throughout the whole thing, and it wasn't funny. So they just really just messed up the Casey Jones character. And, you know, they put on the mask like one time, and that was it. And he only did it to hide his face like one time, and he doesn't really care. And then all of a sudden he's just this cop, and he's trying to be a detective. Like, that's not Casey Jones, man. So they botched that pretty bad.
I would agree with that. And for all of those reasons, I mean, my scores are going to be very similar to last week. I think in some ways maybe this movie is marginally better, but I think a lot of it is lost because there's a lot of immaturity throughout. I think some of the plot mechanics are just feel very canned and feel very cliche. Again, we have the blue beam in the sky, which we can talk about, but I just think a lot of this movie still fundamentally doesn't work, so I am giving this once again a 2.
I'll give it a 3, and this is going to be the highest score that I'm going to give this movie, only because I like the Leonardo change, and he was like the only thing closest to the Turtles that I liked, and Donatello to an extent. But then they just fucked up Casey Jones, and then I guess we gotta include Laura Linney, right? Like she's a hero technically in this movie, and she's just kind of in her own movie as well. It feels like she's in like a detective movie that's just totally disconnected with everything that's going on, because she's acting like in a drama, and everyone else is acting like in a kids movie. And I guess you got to throw in Will Arnett on that side too, because he's kind of a big part of the end. It's kind of interesting because they kind of stole this idea from Dragon Ball Z, right? And I don't know if you're too familiar, but like,
I am not that familiar with Dragon Ball Z, so you're going to have to inform me.
okay, here's the connection. In Dragon Ball Z, obviously Goku, the hero, and his son Gohan, and all the heroes, right? Vegeta, all of them, they can't take credit for defeating these aliens that come and invade Earth, right? They don't want to take the credit because then they'd be famous, and they don't want that. So what they do is they have a friend of theirs take the credit. His name is Hercule. And essentially he's the same role as Will Arnett. Will Arnett takes the credit of the Turtles from the first movie and becomes this famous dude in New York, gets the key to the city, and it's the same thing that they got from Dragon Ball. So I thought that was a cool little thing. I don't know if that was intentional, but the idea of making a guy take the hero aspect out of it, or taking the hero credit for it while the Turtles kind of hide in the shadows still. Yeah, that's straight out of Dragon Ball Z, and that's Hercule. And they did it, and it's pretty much the same thing. So I thought that was a little cool little tie-in. I don't know if they did it on purpose, but that's the only time I get to talk about Dragon Ball Z this probably this month or this quarter for this podcast. So there you go.
Right, and again, I feel very similarly when we talk about the villains as well. Shredder, in a way, feels as useless as ever, and Karai gets a little bit more to do. But the person that I want to talk about is Tyler Perry, because I know what people think of Tyler Perry, and I totally get it. As a filmmaker, his movies are not really good. But if you go and watch a movie like Gone Girl, which you should because it's really good, I think he's a really good character actor. I think in that role especially, I think he really controls the screen, and he does a great job playing basically a Johnny Cochran-like character. I think he does just a spectacular job. So you cast him in this movie as Baxter Stockman, and you're expecting something, I would say, decent, but then you sit down and, just like Laura Linney, just like Will Arnett, there is clearly no quality control on the set because Tyler Perry is hamming it up and is trying to chew scenery, and it doesn't work.
Yeah, it's the same issues you had with Jamie Foxx in Amazing Spider-Man 2. Just, too cartoony, too over the top, just like a caricature of a nerd, you know what I mean? If you're going to do the Baxter character, because in the show, obviously he turns into the Fly character, right? If you're going to do that, fuck, man, and you're spending all this money, just get fucking Jeff Goldblum to go in there and turn into the Fly at the end. You know how crazy the fans would have gone for that? Like the movie fans? For if you cast Jeff Goldblum as a scientist that turns into a Fly at the end of this movie? I mean, there you go. I mean, that was the whole basis of the character anyway. It was based on Jeff Goldblum's The Fly. So, just do that instead of this hokey shit. And it's just, the character just, oh man, this is one of the worst performances I've seen from Tyler Perry. And I've never even seen like a lot of his movies, but I've seen a lot of the trailers and stuff. But he's really good as like the Medea character, and he's good playing the different characters. And I think he's a really underrated actor, to be honest. But in this, it just is like, it's like he took no direction and just did his own thing and just didn't care. And like, all the other people in this movie just taking a paycheck.
That is certainly true. My villain score is a 2.
I'm going with a 1 again like last week. And the fact that they had Shredder in this movie, and he just was a dude. He was a normal dude in this movie. That just completely killed all the mystique that they tried to kill off in the last movie. It was like 0 to 0 in here, and it just, yeah, he put on the mask at the end, but it was just pointless because the mask at the end didn't even look. It was like a black suit that just totally did not look like the Shredder. And they killed all the mythos and all the legend of the Shredder in this movie.
And how about the fact that Bebop and Rocksteady were in this movie, one of whom is played by professional wrestler Sheamus, and we haven't even really talked about them. I mean, the way that Bebop first came on the screen, he was played by an African American. I mean, that is a borderline minstrel performance from him.
Yeah, and I can't believe they were so dead set on the 90s look that they had the dude in like a purple mohawk and purple glasses. It just does not fit the times at all. I don't think I've ever seen anyone, even the crazy times I've been to Hollywood, dress up like that. You know what I mean? Not even cosplayers on the streets of Hollywood dress like that. You know what I mean? Just totally off. And they were just completely way too stupid. Like, way too stupid. And they just didn't even sound like even when they were human beings, they just talked like complete idiots that sounded like, animals that were turned into humans, you know what I mean? So it's just, and then when they turned into animals, it just, made it worse. It just made it worse. And then apparently I thought at the end that Casey Jones killed them, but no, they just got, they got blown up but survived somehow. So there you go. Kids logic.
Yeah, there's some kids' logic there. By the way, how many times did they say "my man" in this movie? Because it was bordering on parody at certain points.
A lot. But, that's kind of the generic script that they came up with. And I can't believe that these guys should have had some chemistry. You know what I mean? Like, Bulk and Skull have chemistry. The two background guys, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern. You know what I mean? And they got no chemistry and totally miscast. If you can't get the chemistry down for two characters like this that need it, then you just don't care.
Right. And let's get to the story. The Turtles are still in the shadows at the beginning, but they're eating pizza while watching the New York Knicks play basketball. And if you've ever watched the New York Knicks play basketball, you would realize what torture this was for the Turtles to be watching what was going on the court at that point. Vernon is the one everyone thinks is the one who took Shredder down, and I would just find the idea of New Yorkers believing this to be absurd. Like, there is no possible way that anyone in New York believes that this fucking guy is the one who took down the Shredder. Like, that alone just ruins the movie for me. And maybe if there was a scene or two of people clearly not believing it, then maybe I would have accepted this more. But the very premise of this movie is fucking stupid.
Yeah, but we're also living in a universe where, people just assume that, pizza falling from the sky is a normal thing at a Knicks game. If that happened, like, okay, so there's a scene at the beginning, like we said, they're at fucking MSG and the turtles are hiding in the top lighting rig, right? And they drop a piece of pizza. If that happened, that would be all over ESPN, the news, be like some random person threw a slice of pizza on the court. That never happens, right? Because that's really dangerous. Because if someone slips and tears an MCL or something like that, which I think they almost joked about in this movie, like that would have been a big deal. So just ridiculous shit like that. We're living in a universe where, I don't know, the dudes are just having dinner with Carmelo Anthony randomly. Carmelo Anthony had
I cannot believe that Carmelo Anthony was in this movie.
he was the king of New York at this time. Like, they filmed this in 2015. That's when the Knicks were still decent, I think. And I think Phil Jackson had not completely killed the team by then. And I know we're getting off in an NBA tangent, but it was just kind of crazy to see Carmelo Anthony. Because I still think, I don't know, I'm going to go on a tangent. I still think he's an underrated player. The system, or the game just kind of changed around him. This was right before the Warriors won their first title. So, then that, like, no one was throwing threes up like crazy like the Warriors were. So, I'm still a Melo fan. I know people shit on him and make fun of him, but goddamn, you put him one-on-one in the paint, he can still score.
And still, a pizza falling in Madison Square Garden would still only be the second craziest thing to happen in that building. Do you know what the first is?
Willis Reed?
Matt Taven winning the Ring of Honor title. Still the dumbest and craziest thing.
Oh, God. That was earlier this year, wasn't it? Funny how things just completely change 6 months later with attendance.
Amazing how that works. All right, we have gone completely off the rails, and now we're going to get back on the rails because we have a mystery to solve. And April O'Neil is the queen of snooping, as she finds out that scientist Baxter Stockman is working for the Shredder, and the goal of this movie is to transfer Krang and all of his minions, as they are going to come and get the Infinity Stone. Wait, no, they're not getting Infinity Stones. We don't really know why they're there. They're just going to put the Technodrome on Earth and bulldoze over New York, I guess.
See, here's the deal. The Technodrome is supposed to be underground, man. So that really bothered me. And I know, as a kid who probably doesn't know really the origins of the Technodrome, they probably don't care, but it's supposed to be underground and then coming up randomly under the ground. You know what I mean? So if anything, the portal should have been underground and the fucking Technodrome bursting through the floor of the Earth. You know what I mean? That's what it's supposed to be. And they went with the space thing, and it just became the blue beam in the sky again. So I know how much you love that trope.
This also became a heist movie at certain points, too. Remember that?
Oh, yeah, where they have to steal the fucking mutagen because they're jealous of Leonardo not telling them that it can turn him a human. And so they coax the humans into helping him steal from the police headquarters this mutagen. And at the end of the movie, what do they do with the mutagen, Jerome?
I don't know. Tell me, Brian. This is all you.
They throw it against the wall and break it. So they waste all their time. It's like the scene in Last Jedi where they try to rob the Canto Bite scene, and it's just a complete waste of time.
Listen, Brian, we are not getting into The Last Jedi. We are not going to have that debate yet, but that movie is significantly better than this one. I would rather watch 1,000 Porgs than ever watch this movie again. Casey Jones becomes involved. He is a cop who nobody believes him, just like nobody believes April. In the first movie, nobody believes Casey Jones. In this movie, there's kind of a final battle. It's revealed that the Turtles, they come out of the shadows, because that's the name of the movie. They reveal themselves, and they save the planet once again, and everybody's happy.
The only thing that they didn't get at the end was a turtle signal in the sky to signal them to help them out whenever they need help. Because Laura Linney definitely played the part of Commissioner Gordon at the end.
For all intents and purposes, my story score is a 2.
It's a 1, man. It's just a mess. The total mess. But at least it wasn't Johnny Knoxville.
Let's get to the technical aspects. I mean, it's the same movie as the first one. I literally have nothing to add to it except I was shocked to realize that there is a different director for this movie than the first one. Did you realize that?
No, as long as it's got the same Michael Bay feel, I don't even think Michael Bay cared if it was a different director. As long as it looked like a Michael Bay movie and he had nothing to do with directing it.
I'm also giving this a 2 because, again, it's basically the same movie as the first one. The designs are roughly the same. The look is almost exactly the same. I mean, there is no discernible difference between the two movies, so I'm giving this a 2.
Last week I gave a 1. This week I'll give it 2, only because I thought the Technodrome looked kind of cool from like a wide-angle shot in the sky, but that was just
You're really stretching.
But man, it's like, is this the only time I'm going to see the Technodrome in a Turtles movie live action? You know what I mean? I keep asking myself that, and I guess that is, man. But I'll never see it come out of the ground like it should be.
All right, let's get to the legacy. I'm giving this a 0. This killed the franchise. This movie did not do well at the box office at all. And who knows what the future of this franchise is going to be, because there is another Nickelodeon show. Turtles will clearly live on television. The same producing team, I guess, has talked about rebooting this franchise again. I have a hard time believing that there is enough sustainability for this to actually be good, especially if you're dealing with the same producers. To me, the producers are the ones that are very clearly dictating the look of this movie, the tone, and if they're still there, then it does not matter who the director is, who is performing in this, because you're going to get the same thing. So I'm giving this a 0.
I'll give it a 1. And I mean, yeah, it killed the franchise. I don't know if it killed Megan Fox's career. I think she kind of just stepped out of the limelight. I mean, Will Arnett was not hurt either way. If anything, this might have killed Carmelo Anthony's career. So we'll just leave it at that.
All right, my total score is an 8.
Same with me.
So that means for the second consecutive week, we have put a movie into the pile of shame after going months without putting anything in. We have returned to the pile of shame back-to-back weeks as both Michael Bay produced Turtles movies have been entered. And Brian, you hate to see it.
Yeah, and what's crazy is that this is actually a higher score for me than last week, but only by 1 point.
So the big question is this the worst Turtle movie ever made?
No, like I mentioned numerous times, the 2014 one is worse, and I'll just blame it on Johnny Knoxville.
I think this is the worst one that's ever been made. And you could argue for the first one, and I certainly would understand your point. But for me, I think there's just a level of immaturity that makes this even worse to watch. I mean, this to me is just an even more unpleasant viewing experience. Did Jason Momoa take inspiration of the line readings of My Man from Bebop and Rocksteady?
Maybe. Because, I mean, every time I heard it, I couldn't help but think of Aquaman. So, yeah, we're on the same wavelength on that one. And I think there was another show recently where they kind of looped this on loop. It might have been Rick and Morty or something like that. Someone might have been a robot, and someone might have been just, as a catchphrase, just put my man, and then, yeah, it's in my head, especially now after watching this movie.
Who was the right person to play Casey Jones if not Stephen Amell?
CM Punk. I keep saying that, but like he looks like the kind of guy you give him longer hair. You don't make him a cop. You kind of put him in street grungy clothing. Yeah, I kind of see him as Casey Jones. I know he wanted to play Casey Jones, but someone like that. You know what I mean? I can't think of anyone else right now, but that's kind of the look that I have in mind and that kind of attitude.
So as far as the look and an attitude goes, I have a bit of an unconventional choice. I think a lot of people will know this actor from dramas like This Is Us, but someone like Milo Ventimiglia, I think he is somebody who could capture that feel and that look. He was Rocky's son, of course. So I think he's got a little bit of the grunginess. He's not as grungy as Elias Koteas, but then again, very few men are. I actually think he would have been perfect in this role. I think we both picked people that would have been better.
And that's not a knock on Stephen Amell. It's just he was just miscast. I don't know if, like I said, I don't know if maybe it was just the director just totally botched the character. But maybe if you gave him longer hair and a wig and, I don't know, gave him a scruffy looking beard and crappy clothes, maybe he could have pulled it off. But I don't think the producers cared.
I do want to see Stephen Amell as Cyclops. That is actually something I desperately want to happen.
I feel you on that one, and that could potentially actually happen because guess who's dying at the end of this season of Arrow?
Spoiler alert. What did Laura Linney do with her paycheck from this movie?
I'd like to think that she bought her family a nice Thanksgiving dinner, got some awesome gifts for her kids, nieces, nephews, and I don't know, maybe bought a new deck for her house.
In this case, I really hope that Laura Linney kind of did her this time. Maybe go for, a nice spa day or spa days. Perhaps take a nice European vacation. I understand that you want to take care of your family at certain points, but like if you're gonna suffer through this experience, then to me, when you get this paycheck, you really want to do something for yourself, in my view.
Yeah, maybe she also did it with Rodrigo Santoro. That's a deep cut right there. If you,
That is a very deep cut. All right, what do we need to make a good turtle movie besides getting rid of Michael Bay, which I think is going to be both of our answers.
whoever's producing the Dark Crystal show right now, and I think we talked about this a couple weeks ago, they got to do that because like they're taking the time to do the puppets right and spending the money because the amount of money they spent on like the explosions and the CGI and the special effects in this movie, you could have maybe saved half of that and just done puppets and live action dudes in suits, and it would have been more emotional connectivity, and it would have been better for the audience and the fans because it would have been nostalgic, and I think kids would have connected more with it. But that's just me. So if they can do it with the Dark Crystal on Netflix, give me like a revival of the original trilogy. Is that dude? Is cousin? What's his name? The dude from the Brady Bunch. The voice of Michelangelo. He's still alive, right? I hope.
I believe that he is. I'm not sure if I would necessarily want to see him return to this role, but I really did appreciate the Dark Crystal prequel. It was incredibly well done. I think that they did a really good job of using puppets, but also using CGI in very subtle ways. That's really what I would like to see. I would love to see a Netflix production of a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles TV series. I think that's where it thrives. And I think if you do something that is 10 episodes, that is high quality, that you're going to get a lot of viewers and you will get people to come back to this franchise because I think there are a lot of people who rightfully feel burned. But there's also a lot of nostalgia, as Dark Crystal proved. There was a ton of nostalgia for that franchise, and they released something that was high quality, and people rewarded it with good reviews and really enjoying it. So that is the direction that I would like to see. Unfortunately, I don't think we're going to get that, and I have no idea what iteration the Turtles are going to take next on the big screen, but they will always have the small screen, I guess.
Yeah, and I don't know if Nickelodeon can work out a deal with the Jim Henson Company, but that's got to be the key because that's where the magic was. So I think they got to go back to that Jim Henson kind of magic, and it's certainly there. And the people that had a love for that, who, I mean, obviously the people who are making the Dark Crystal now had a love for that stuff in the '80s and '70s. So if you pick the right kind of people with the right kind of love, you can pull it off. But I just feel like the people behind it now are just don't care. So there you go.
Perhaps. All right, Brian, we are done with the Turtles. No more Turtle movies. But now we're going to move on to something else. And we have not talked about this off air, but we need to talk about the Judge Dredd movies. And I propose that the next 2 weeks we review the 1995 Judge Dredd movie starring Sylvester Stallone, which would only be the second time that we've talked about Sylvester Stallone, the first time being Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. And then in 2 weeks we review Carl Urban in Dredd, which is a very underrated movie.
And the timing kind of fits because about a month and a half ago at this point, we got Last Blood, the final Rambo movie. So Stallone's in that, so that kind of has some relevancy there. And of course, Carl Urban was in The Boys. I still haven't watched The Boys. Maybe I'll watch it this Christmas as like a Christmas viewing for me. But again, Carl Urban still kind of relevant right now in the pop culture world. So maybe it's kind of the time to do it. And I've been kind of saying that we need to watch Judge Dredd because I've seen Judge Dredd maybe like 3 or 4 times. I'm talking the '90s one, and I still remember very little from it. But all I remember is like Rob Schneider in it. So there you go. And I remember renting that movie, and I remember my parents were like, "It's rated R. I don't know if we can let you watch this," but I'm like, "It's an action movie," and blah blah blah. And they finally let me rent it. So there you go.
So yes, next week we will be reviewing the 1995 version, and we'll be talking all about Sylvester Stallone and Rob Schneider, two very popular people in 2019.
For sure. That's the Sylvester Stallone-inator, or however that reference goes.
We're not doing that, Brian. So we will be talking to you next week, though. For Brian, my name is Jerome. Thank you so much for listening. We will talk to you again next week.
Why can't they get Sean Penn as Michelangelo? Because Spicoli is pretty much Michelangelo anyway.